morning, people. Welcome back to F Politics. You will never hear me show respect for Kay Burley, because everything she did this morning, she could have done years ago. In fact, I've been saying it for years, but she's clearly just decided that she doesn't like Richard Tice, the deputy leader of the Reform Party. And that gave us absolute gold this morning, because she finally decided to really go against one of the main politicians behind Brexit.
France's President Macron will tell the PM tomorrow that Brexit has clearly failed. I felt you winced when I was talking about President Macron then.
Well, look, I mean, he would say that, wouldn't he?
See, that right there is what makes the Brexiteers feel like a cult, because he's acting offended that Macron would dare suggest that Brexit has failed, but Nigel Farage has literally said,
Brexit has failed.
So bad things can be said about Brexit as long as it's coming from his own party. Do you see how controlling that is? The Reform Party is saying, don't listen to anybody else but us, even if they're saying the same things that we are. We'll get back to that.
But the reality is that the powerhouse of the EU economy, Germany, is in its third year of recession. And this idea that we should get closer to a failing, struggling economic model is completely absurd.
Yeah, I get that. Germany having a hard time economically means that the 60% of British exporters who say that Brexit is making their lives harder are simply lying. Germany having a hard time economically means that the Food and Drink Federation, who is currently begging Keir Starmer to get rid of the Brexit trade barriers that are making food more expensive, they're also lying. Germany having a hard time economically means that the British Medical Association saying that Brexit has made it harder to recruit doctors to the NHS is also lying. And if you think I'm being unfair to him by interpreting what he's saying this way, just wait.
The US is going gangbusters, and we need to learn why that is, because they've got cheap energy, because they've got smart regulations, not over-regulation. We know what works. It's the US. It's what works in Asia. So why don't we learn lessons from those countries and actually try and repeat that and gain from that?
Have you heard of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement? It's a free trade deal between America, Canada, and Mexico, which gives America free trade with its closest neighbors. It also includes regulatory cooperation, where the authorities of each of those countries work together to make sure that the regulations aren't different in a way that damages trade between them all. And oh, would you look at that? Canada and Mexico are the US's biggest trading partners. It's neighbors. So the American model is based on having frictionless trade with its closest neighbors by making sure the rules of those countries are aligned. So if we wanted to follow the American model to improve our economy, we would be joining the EU.
And so I think the Prime Minister should be really focusing on that and the opportunities for a partial trade deal with a new US president that actually favours the UK. We've clearly heard it. He treats us differently from the EU. The joy of being outside the EU is that actually I think we've got a good chance of having a much better trading relationship with the US, looking at a partial trade deal, because we've got that flexibility as an independent sovereign nation. And that
I find it insane that he's saying we should literally prioritize trade with America over trade with the EU when we do 17.6% of our trade with America and 46.7% of our trade with the EU. And it's especially ironic because a couple of minutes later he accuses Kay Burley of not caring enough about the people of the UK and focusing too much on what's happening in America.
What about the tariffs?
look, it's
Good
a negotiation.
idea, bad idea.
Look,
so you think he's bluffing?
And let's see where it ends up.
And what impact is it going to have on our economy?
You're clearly not interested in what's happening in the UK. I am. I'm negotiating on behalf of British citizens.
Because Richard Tice is the one saying that we should do what Trump wants, even if it means sacrificing almost half of the UK's supply routes. And yet he's accusing other people of being the ones who don't care about the UK. Do you see how these nationalists don't care about the nation? But here's where the fun starts, because all the facts proving that Brexit has been an absolute disaster for the UK economy and the cost of living appear to have just fallen into Kay Burley's lap just this morning, because she's finally starting to talk about them.
Let's talk about economists and analysts, first of all, generally saying the impact of leaving the EU single market and customs union has had a negative effect on our economy.
All our economies are struggling.
But does that mean that Brexit isn't making things worse? Because one of your party's candidates certainly seems to think so.
We're getting poor for a variety of reasons, of which Brexit is one.
Again, it's the cult thing of only listen to us, don't listen to other people, even if they're saying the same things as we are. But after Tice bangs on about Germany again, Kay Burley comes back with it.
3 million fewer jobs, according to Cambridge Econometrics, 32% lower investment, 5% lower exports, 16% lower imports, £311 billion worse off by 2035 because we've left the EU.
And it's just complete nonsense. I mean, this is twaddled by Ramona institutions that just can't accept the fact that we've left. And actually, we've now got great opportunities, and we should grab them and thrive them. The issue with Brexit is that the Tories utterly failed, having taken us rightly out of the EU, to take advantage of it.
Do you notice how he just called it nonsense? He didn't actually give an argument as to how Brexit hasn't damaged the economy. And for the record, and bear with me on this, Brexit not damaging the economy is still Brexit damaging the economy, because think about all the resources that went into making Brexit happen. So it has to deliver a return, otherwise, on balance, this has been a negative experience for the UK. Brexit was pretty much the sole focus of the UK government for half a decade. They spent billions on it.
There are more than 7,000 people working on Brexit. There is funding for an extra 9,000 staff to be recruited into the civil service, enabling us to accelerate government preparations as and when we need to. And obviously, just as important as that, in relation to frontline services such as the UK's border force, we are currently recruiting an extra 300 staff in time for our exit, with plans in the pipeline to recruit 1,000 more staff so they're ready to deal with any increase in work.
So if you can't give an argument as to how spending all that money has actually improved the economy, you're admitting that it's damaged the economy. And Kay Burley calls him out for dismissing all the economists who say that Brexit has been bad.
So we don't need experts, as somebody famous once said, is what you're suggesting there. Let me just quote Bloomberg to you, though. Found that Brexit is costing the UK economy £100 billion a year.
Again, I mean, this is the same Bloomberg that told us that we shouldn't leave the EU. Of course they're going to do that. But all the city... Do you remember when the city said that we were going to...
making it up, are they?
I'm afraid to say, actually, bluntly, they are.
So you're suggesting that Bloomberg are making up those
garbage.
figures?
I just come back to the simple fact.
You're saying that Cambridge econometrics are making up those numbers?
It's garbage.
What about the Centre for Economic Performance?
It's complete garbage.
So was I lying? He is literally saying that all the experts and economists are lying to you, only his reality is the right one, even though his party has admitted that Brexit is making us poor. In fact, Nigel Farage, on the 5-year anniversary of Brexit, was discussing how Brexit has gone, and he said this.
And everything from financial services to fisheries is probably more difficult now than it was.
So Nigel Farage is allowed to say that Brexit is making every area of the UK economy worse, but all the experts and economists, they're not allowed to say it, and if they do, they're clearly just making stuff up. Again, it's the cult strategy of you need to get all your information from us so that we can spin it in a way that benefits us, by blaming Germany, by saying Brexit isn't being done right, you get me? And when it's pointed out to him that he's choosing to sacrifice almost half of our trade to help Trump, he denies that basic reality.
Where you want to focus, where the prosperity is, it's in the US. It's not in the failing recessionary EU, is it?
They're our biggest trading partner.
No, they're not. The US is our biggest single trading partner, okay? So let's focus on what's good in the US.
The European Union, the European bloc, is our biggest trading partner.
And it's failing, right? The powerhouse of that trading bloc is in recession.
Do you see how when the truth is pointed out to him, he doesn't even address it, he just jumps onto the next propaganda line? It reminds me of a quote from Dexter.
It's like watching someone ski moguls. You just hop from one lie to the next. No shame, no embarrassment. You just don't give a shit.
Richard Tice is a con artist, and he has been for years. In 2016, he said
that there is no evidence that leaving the European Union would damage our trade with the EU at all. But I think when people understand that there is a legal obligation on the European Union to negotiate a trade agreement with us, they'll say, actually, you know, it's probably the status quo. It'll be broadly the same.
So that's A, a promise that Brexit would not damage our trade with the EU, and 60% of British exporters say that it has, and B, a commitment that it's almost illegal to leave the EU and not have a deal, and yet a few months later, the policy of his Reform Party was to leave the EU without a deal. This man has been conning the United Kingdom for years, so it's really good to see him finally shown up as the corrupt used car salesman that he really is. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.